Good afternoon. I have something real exciting to talk about. In case you haven't noticed, there's an awful lot of information that's being put out on the internet and Facebook about this Planet X, Planet 9, Nibiru. And, you know, a few years ago when I first heard about this, a few things came to my mind. Some years ago, I was reading, and the prophet Joseph Smith talked about a planet that was going to come. And he called it the great sign of the second coming of Christ. And he even went into some depth, some detail. You can still get it to this day. You can look it up about this planet. And that he talked about if two planets were going the same direction, but one is going faster than the other, they would eventually be able to hook up. And that's about all. There's not much more than that was recorded in that conversation. But you can make some deductions just from that alone. Well, I thought that was really interesting because he called, like I said, he called it the great sign of the second coming of Christ. And it really took me by surprise. I just never really considered that Christ would come in that way. And he doesn't actually say that. But there's other things now that, you can go through the scripture and you start finding all these interesting things, like stuff in Joel, in the Old Testament, in Isaiah, and I see these connections between this. So anyhow, I kind of had forgotten about it. I didn't pay much attention to it. But I did remember it. Then when I heard about this Planet X, they really started talking it up, probably around 2008. And I thought, I wonder if there's a connection there to this planet that the prophet Joseph Smith talked about was going to come, and it'd be the great sign of the second coming of Christ. So I paid some attention, and there wasn't a whole lot coming in at the time, but things were coming in. And I did some research, and this planet that they've been watching and looking for went all the way back to like 1950, early 1950s. And then around 1985, it really got some attention, and then all of a sudden it was just kind of gone. And I guess they finally got the memo about national security, because they didn't want anybody to know about this thing, is what I think now. So now in 2008, there just started being an awful lot. There were people that were saying they were seeing it, pretty much amateur astronomers. NASA really wasn't talking about it. Whatever information they were putting out was very negative, which I now realize was nothing but disinformation. And they started making these amateur astronomers and people like Marshall Masters, I think I got his name right, and a few others. They started making predictions when he would start to see it. And they said you'd be able to start to see it, like right around 2014, 2012, 2014. And, you would get pictures every once in a while, but it was really hard to tell if it was anything at all. They just kind of looked like lens flares for the most part. Well, it turns out this planet is actually not a planet at all. In fact, Joseph Smith said that. He said some would say it's a planet, some would say it's a comet. And but he doesn't expound or qualify any more than that in these statements. Well, as it turns out, it's a whole nother mini solar system. And here a few years ago, they were tracking the darn thing, and it went behind the sun. They said it's going to slingshot out around the sun, and it's going to pass the earth, and we're going to have all these disasters and calamities, and it didn't happen. Well, they said it got burned up. Well, evidently it didn't get burned up. And from what I can gather is this little mini system, the orbit is so elliptical that it really went way behind the sun. Started to come back. It's in the gravitational field now, and it's at an extreme angle, and so of our elliptic plane. So it's almost like this, okay? And this orbit was behind the sun is extremely elliptical. So it got behind there, and you really couldn't see it until it got closer and closer. And every once in a while, one of the planets would pop up or pop down behind, either above the sun or below it. And within a very short time, they'd be gone because these planets are going so much faster around their sun, which they call it a brown dwarf. And by the way, there's like 9 components to this whole thing. Well, there's 2 things that's going on. One is we're going a little bit faster. The Earth is going a little bit faster around the sun than this little mini solar system is going around the sun. So we're catching up to it. So that's one reason we're seeing it more all the time also. The other thing is it's gotten a lot closer to the sun. So now these orbits, when they pop up and down, you can see them for much longer periods of time. So here of late, and I would actually go back about 2014, there started getting some really good shots of this, different components of this thing. And by the way, I think I mentioned this, it's like 9 components. It's something like, what was it, 3 or 4, I think it's 4 planets and like 3 moons. And one of them, they call it the blue Kachina. And the other one's the red Kachina, then Hercubus, then Planet X, and they got 2 different names even for that. So I don't know if the red and blue Kachina are moons or they're planets. I just don't know, and I don't think anybody else knows either. So some of the predictions that they were making is this thing was going to be very, very visible come August. Well, they were right on. There are literally hundreds of pictures of this thing coming in. Of course, it's not being carried by the mainstream media. You got to go to alternative news media to see it. There has been some stuff on mainstream media about it, but not a whole lot. Unless you're in another country besides America. You know, it's national security, so they're not going to tell us anything about it until it gets really, really nasty. Well, there's been all these evidences going back all the way to 1950. They called it the perturber because it was affecting the gravitational rotation and orbits of these other planets. So they knew something was out there. And now it's gotten closer and closer and closer. And there's more and more that's being put out on it. And it's causing all of these disturbances on our Earth, our weather patterns, volcanoes, earthquakes. It's been warming our planet. All these things. This is all because of this mini solar system that has come through. Now, going back about 40 years ago, I read a scripture, a Mormon scripture in the Doctrine and Covenants, which really took me by surprise. And we're talking 40 years ago that I read this thing. And it goes like this. It says, "For behold, I do not require at their hands to fight the battles of Zion. For as I said in a former commandment, even so will I fulfill. I will fight your battles." This is God speaking. "Behold, the destroyer I have sent forth to destroy and lay waste mine enemies, and not many years hence they shall not be left to pollute mine heritage." Okay? And it goes on a little bit further. "And to blaspheme my name upon the lands which I have consecrated for the gathering together of my saints." Wow, that just caught me really by surprise. I'd heard about the destroying angel, but as far as the word destroyer or destroying, that was the only time I ever remember hearing that word. And I said, and then I read that, I read it multiple times. "Behold, the destroyer have I sent forth to destroy." So he sent it forth. He said the destroyer. "And lay waste mine enemies, and not many years hence they shall not be left to pollute mine heritage." And that just struck me as so odd. Well then, just as recently they found the Corbin Bible. You can look it up online. It's called the Corbin Bible. And it talks about the destroyer. and it talks about how it destroys. And it's really quite terrifying, to be honest with you. And I just got done reading it again online about the destroyer in the Golden Bible, and I started finding these similarities of these prophecies throughout the scriptures, the Bible, Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, when this great burning is going to take place. And the wicked are all going to be consumed and destroyed. And it's everywhere in the scriptures. You cannot avoid it if you read the scriptures any at all. Well, then I had been looking more at the history too. Well, there's got to be a history of this thing. Turns out there's a long, long history of this thing. And I read one that was really interesting because they were saying it comes approximately every 3,500 years. Well, that's not true. Not according to some of the stuff that I've read. It's more like 335 years. It's just that most of the time when it comes through, it doesn't have that big of an impact. Why? I don't know. They don't know. But it talks about that's what happened at the time of Moses with the children of Israel and all the plagues, and them being delivered from Pharaoh and from the Egyptians. That was one of the times that it came through. And the next really most dramatic time it came through was at the time of Christ. And so there's some really, when you stop and think about, there's some real interesting things about that. It caused that great earthquake, which split everything. It rent the temple, and the Holy of Holies, the veil, rent it from top to bottom. And history talks about it was a heck of an earthquake. All right. And Jesus, after his resurrection, well, then there was all kinds of other people resurrected at that time too, which I will say this thing has the component for ascension and resurrection, okay? And again, that's one of those things, who's going to understand that, or who could even explain it? But Jesus talked about our time, and he said, greater signs in the heavens and the earth shall you see, and greater signs in the earth beneath. And there should be a new heaven and a new earth. So the impact of this thing coming through, this mini solar system that came through at the time of Christ, was pretty profound. But Jesus said it's going to be even greater the next time around. So here we are. And the time element is perfect for our time. Now, these video clips I can only make so long, so I'm going to suggest you do all your own research into this, because it's out there. You can find it. It's real easy. Anybody can find it now. So here we go. This thing is coming through, and it's going to have a much greater impact than ever before. Isaiah talks what it's going to do to the planet, it's going to do to the people. So I was thinking about that, and in that same 105th section of the Doctrine and Covenants, which I just read to you, where the Lord says, I shall send forth the destroyer, there's a couple other scriptures. And that one was verse 14 and 15. But if you go to verse 12, or 11 and 12, we'll say 10, 11, and 12, it talks about his elders in these last days, that they themselves may be prepared, and that my people may be taught more perfectly, and have experience, and know more perfectly concerning their duty, and the things which I require at their hands. And this cannot be brought to pass until mine elders are endowed with power from on high. Now remember, I was telling you, when this came through at the time of Christ, that power from on high came down, and actually, what did it do? It caused this great resurrection that took place. And we know on the day of Pentecost, it looked like they had flames above their heads, and they spoke in tongues, and they did all these other interesting things. So there's this incredible enlightenment that takes place. The prophet Joel talks about it, this incredible enlightenment and this power of God that comes down. And he says, for behold, I have prepared a great endowment. This is verse 12. For behold, I have prepared a great endowment and blessing to be poured out upon them, inasmuch as they are faithful and continue in humility before me. Now, it's been my experience when God hardly ever uses an expletive like great. But he says great here, and I will say that it's something that I can't comprehend at this point. When God says great, it's great. And he talks about the righteous, and that they're going to have this great endowment and blessing poured out upon them. Poured out upon them, coming down from the heavens above. Okay? So, and then I'm going to go, and that's in the Doctrine and Covenants. Then we go into the Book of Mormon, and you have some of the same exact things it talks about. This is in 1 Nephi, chapter 22, starting in verse 17. Wherefore, he will preserve the righteous by his power, even if it so be that the fullness of his wrath must come, and the righteous be preserved even unto the destruction of their enemies by fire. Wherefore, the righteous need not fear, for thus saith the prophet, they shall be saved, even if it so be as by fire. Wow. There's a wonderful promise. Another one. You know, you got the great endowment and blessing to be poured out upon the righteous. And then he talks here, God says, by fire he'll destroy the wicked and preserve the righteous. It continues, behold, my brethren, I say unto you that these things must shortly come. Yea, even blood and fire and vapor of smoke must come, and it must needs be upon the face of the earth. And it cometh unto men according to the flesh, if it so be they'll harden their hearts against the Holy One of Israel. For behold, the righteous shall not perish, for the time surely must come that all they who fight against Zion shall be cut off. So there it is again. Now, we have the Bundys in prison. We have the Patriots in prison. Okay? And they're righteous men. And those that are persecuting them are wicked. And I'm going to go ahead and say a prediction that they're going to walk out of prison. They're going to walk out. Now, they're either going to walk out because these judges are going to start getting a message. Things are going to start to happen. And they're going to realize that they're just on the wrong side of this battle. But they're on the side of the evil one. And they're going to let them out. Or, as it said, they're going to be destroyed by fire. Okay? It's right there. Now, you don't have to take my word about this stuff. I'd like everybody to research the Colburn Bible. What I just described to you, as it talks about in the Book of Mormon, is exactly what it describes in the Colburn Bible about this desolating burning and fire. It comes down, and the stench of the sulfur and the burning rocks being flung out of heaven, the ground opening up and belching fire. All these things are going to happen. Interesting enough, the righteous are going to be changed. There'll be a literal physical change in their physiology that they will be able to survive. They're not going to die. And there's another scripture which I haven't read in a while, but I believe is in the Bible. And God says, in the last days I shall plead with my people with the sword and with fire. Well, the sword's been happening. Sword is war. And that's been happening for some time. But now the fire is coming. And it also says, all those who call upon my name shall be saved. So it's just a matter of change of the heart, towards a love and kindness and empathy and sympathy, esteeming our brother as ourselves, loving our fellow man, loving God with all our heart, might, mind, and strength. The greatest commandment ever given, the second is like unto it, to love our fellow man as ourselves. Those are the two greatest commandments, people. And if you are breaking those commands either knowingly or ignorantly, infinitely you'll be better off if you're breaking that commandment ignorantly. But nevertheless, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. And all these wicked and corrupt judges, man, oh man, I feel bad for them. And all these law enforcement, the FBI, feel really bad for you guys. Because I can't imagine how bad it's going to be. And all the elites of this world and what they've done to everything. That's why they're going in the caves and the cliffs of the rocks. as it talks about in Isaiah, so they can avoid this thing. Anyhow, that's my prediction. The Bundys, the Patriots, they're going to be walking out of prison in the very near future. And either that or the wicked are going to be destroyed, and then they'll walk out anyhow. Okay? So anyhow, thank you so much. Hope you enjoy this.